Why We Bleep is sponsored by Signal Sounds. Darling, are you all right? You haven't touched your Happy Meal. Yes, I'm just thinking about my studio. I've had the same Yamaha PSS 170 connected to a 10,000 watt PA system for so long now. I just need a change. Oh, darling, have you spoken to signalsounds.com? They've all manner of insane and wildly inspiring gear that might just blow those cobwebs away. What about the Synth UX Touch 2? It's a touch-based synth and effects unit with swappable faceplates, so you can turn it from a looper into a subtractive synth to a mutable instruments rings-based synth running on the powerful Daisy Seed platform, and you can develop your own modes. Or there's the new Super Synthesis range of Eurorack modules, compact and affordable vibey modules, including the 6HP 2-operator FM module, a quad VCA, phaser, a whole mini system. And finally, why don't you drown it all in reverb with the new Erica Synth Nightverb? It's a highly musical and original lush stereo algorithmic reverb that would make the guy who invented the Lexicon Hall algorithm cry himself to sleep at night. Oh, thank you, darling. I think everyone within a 5-mile radius is going to enjoy my new musical direction. So if you'd like to wake the dead and drown them in reverb, visit signalsounds.com. That's signalsounds.com. Why We Bleep is also sponsored by thonk.co.uk. This month, the beautiful Steve from Thonk is on holiday. And he's in a field looking at the trees, and he asked me to tell you about a guy called Timo Rosendahl. Oh, I've met Timo Rosendahl. Timo Rosendahl is the man who accosted me on a bus late at night in Berlin. Past midnight, he approached me and said, "Would you like a module?" Actually, he was incredibly charming and sweet and was like, are you Mala Melodies? Because I make modules. And he gave me a kit called an FMP. The FMP is a lo-fi FM synth and drum module that uses the Yamaha YM2413, one of the line of awesome OPL chips, similar to what is in the Akemi's Castle, but a different configuration. And he has this amazing module you can build yourself where you can push around a YM2413 and make drums and awesome, simple lo-fi or techery tones. The FMP is available from Thonk as a kit, along with the 3394, a complete analog synth voice in the same size module, 8 HP, and it has an oscillator with 3 different waveforms, and it's got a sub-oscillator. It has a 24 dB filter, which is very acid, and noise, as well as built-in VCA, and 2 envelopes. So a whole thing, and has this kind of awesome, sweet, classic kind of electro acid sound. Timo has done workshops. He was in fact at Berlin doing workshops, and that's why he had a spare FMP kit. So Timo's building stuff to be built, and so I haven't built the FMP yet, but I am saying to you that I think Timo knows what he's doing when it comes to building kits that are fun to build. So if you're looking for a digital or an analog voice or both, then look at the Timo Rosendahl FMP or the 3394 from Timo Rosendahl. It's available at Thonk. That's thonk.co.uk. Why? Today we are going to talk to the man behind the busy curtain, Matthew of ALM Busycircuits. The company so good they named it twice. The man with the hat and the glasses, who you might have seen at shows, demoing gear, standing and chatting to people. That's Matthew. Matthew is the person behind and the founder of ALM Busycircuits. And I've been trying to pin down Matthew for like 3 years, it feels, to get to talk to him on this podcast. We finally made it happen. ALM are a Eurorack and now software plugin and also pedal manufacturer. You may know them from such modules as Pamela's Workout, Pamela's New Workout, Pamela's Final Workout, Pam in the City, and so forth. The Pamela line has provided clocks and modulation to a great many modular synths. I think they're one of, if not the most popular module in the format. It's certainly like number one on Modular Grid, which I think may mean something. It definitely means something. So Pamela's New Workout, and the various workouts, it's an amazingly useful module, and it was the kind of founding of ALM, and certainly it's kept the company going. But Matthew, as we talk in this podcast, has made like more than 40 modules, it would seem. Akemi's Castle, the insane module based on the Yamaha YMF262 chip that's in the Sound Blaster card, which I made a video of, and it's amazing. Akemi's Taiko, the drum version, the Squid Sample, this amazing complex sampler and sort of like throwback thing. So many great modules like Beast's Chalkboard, like the Octave Switcher, all these useful little utilities, and everything they do with this kind of sort of whimsy. There's like a fun playfulness to their designs and their logos and the names. And there is also this sort of 80s and 90s leaning kind of rave sort of tinge aspect to it. It may just be me who sees that for some reason, but hopefully other people see it too. It all feels very like rave inspired. And guess what? When you talk to Matthew about the history, as we do in this podcast, there's a reason for that. We are going to have a conversation with Matthew that is very biographical about his life, how he got into this whole thing. And it's a very interesting path. And through it, we're going to learn of the machines that he loves and why he loves them. All kinds of interesting things come out. Matthew, who generally hangs in the back and maybe is the shyer person when it comes to doing interviews, I found on this occasion to be very verbose and happy to talk about his history. So thank you, Matthew, for finally agreeing to talk and opening up about your life. So we'll talk more afterwards. First, let's bleep with Matthew of ALM Busycircuits. Thanks.
Yeah, well, that's why I wanted like a 3-letter name, like, you know, EMS or ARP or whatever, you know, ARP, whatever, because I thought they were cool. The Busycircuits, I don't know, I just like the way it sounded, and I was worried that if I was just ALM, that there's like massive like corporations called ALM, you know. I knew I'd sort of get bored of the name, so having like 2 names, although it's really one name, means, you know, some days we can be ALM, other days we can be Busycircuits, or we can be ALM Busycircuits, which I now think is actually a bit stupid, but
I like it.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe one day we'll just become Busycircuits. It will be a lot more simple, I think. But I really like the logo. I really like the ALM logo, so yeah, I don't know what I'd do then.
You have a lot of whimsy in your names, like, you know, and I've asked you before and you were like, I can't spill the secrets of each name. I can't
spill the secrets.
Maybe there's no secret, but I don't know. But how do you name your products?
The idea of naming them is always kind of like, unless there's something like short and the name won't fit on the panel, then it'll be somebody something, which kind of goes back to like Tamiya remote control cars.
Yes.
And like Vanessa's Lunchbox and Willie's Jeep and somebody something kind of thing, which I think other things have been named as well and I've always sort of liked. and it makes things more kind of like personable, I guess, more than just an object, maybe. I don't know. And also it's fun. And then I think the other thing as well, like I was talking to someone about this the other day, and you know, like how you can name things and they don't really mean anything, but they sound good. The sort of words together sound sort of interesting. They could mean something. We were talking about like, so I think I'm a little bit older than you, but I don't know if you grew up watching like Saturday afternoon wrestling, like British wrestling, and all the wrestlers had funny names. So you'd have like
wrestling. We had it.
Yeah, it was massive. Yeah, and the names were like Giant Haystacks, Kendo Nagasaki, Big Daddy, and maybe like in my subconscious that kind of like came
Mega
through.
Milton.
Yeah, you know, that kind of like,
I love it.
I don't know, but it was amazing. The like British wrestling, it was like, you know, you should look it up on YouTube. It like Giant Haystacks, it's incredible, and they were all like so out of shape. But they weren't really. I don't know, they weren't really. But and Kendo Nagasaki,
like American ones.
A lot of them did go over to America, I think. But you should look up Kendo Nagasaki because his like life story is crazy. And
can you give me the abridged version? What's his stick?
Well, he was like a wrestler for years, and he was always masked, and he was like really, really scary. And he'd have this whole like ceremony thing before the matches where he'd put like ceremonial powder around and stuff. But then he got like unmasked. And when they unmasked him, he was even more scary than when he had the mask, because he had all his head was like shaved all the way back with long hair. And then he had a massive tattoo like on his forehead. And this would have been like early mid-80s. Like you just did not see that sort of thing. And it was so scary. It's just sort of it's kind of interesting and weird. And I'd forgotten all this. And then I went on like a rabbit hole reading up all about it. And I thought, maybe this has sort of subconsciously influenced some of the names.
You also intimated that it's sort of like Tamiya car kits. It's interesting and funny the way you have like brand names, like, and when you see your systems together, the system coupe, it's like a sort of all-star list of like, it looks like a sort of, you know, 80s racers boiler suit with like all of the like weird different brand names intentionally. Clearly it's what are you why?
I think that was
I love it. Let me be clear.
I
just think it's worth remarking.
It was just fun. I think it was just fun, and it kind of like this idea of this complete system being like a car and being very sort of car focused, and I don't know, and probably like as a nod to like the Tamiya stuff. And
yeah,
you know, just sort of, it was sort of fun. It was, you know, it was really fun to do all the coupe stuff.
I mean, I love the boxes for those things. I used to look at them. My brothers had Tamiya cars and I never got into them. But like, you know, same as like I've been like nerding out about Atari ST recently. And it's just like, it's fun to look at the old boxes, like some of the stuff like the design, the packaging.
I have a Mega ST.
Oh yeah, what a format.
Maybe that's where the name, that's maybe where the name comes from. I started making music on like an Amiga with like a tracker and whatnot, and absolutely hated it. Hated trackers. You know, all I wanted was Cubase. But you had to get an ST.
But you knew that existed, presumably.
Yeah. You knew it existed, and STs were kind of like cheaper than Amigas. But the problem was that getting Cubase, because Cubase was never properly cracked, you know, and you could never afford. So you always had like a dodgy copy of Cubase that would kind of work, but then crash, because I was only, you know, sort of like 18, 19, like, you know, I didn't have much money or anything.
How much would a Cubase been? It would have been probably the same cost of the computer again, right?
Yeah. Oh, easily. Yeah. A lot more. And it was like a really amazing piece of software at the time, you know, because it was like a full like graphical user interface, and you could do the left click thing and the little menu popped up, which at the time was like, oh my God.
What do you mean?
Like, well, now you take it for granted that you get this context menu where you pick your tool. But I always remember that about Cubase, the first time you seeing it, clicking the right mouse button, and then this kind of toolbar popping up, and you've been able to select the different tool. Yeah, I guess Amiga had windowing stuff as well, but you never really sort of used it. You know, you just used the Amiga for games. And
yeah, basically the ST was absolutely like a desktop. It was like desktop publishing and business use and all of these things. And for music especially, because it had MIDI ports, which
Yeah.
I saw a thing today where it's like it cost 70 cents or something to add MIDI ports, and it created a whole industry where. And there was a really good. There's a Matt Annis article about it. He wrote the Bleep and Bleep techno stuff. There's a book he wrote, but he wrote a great article about it, and it's interesting. It's like there's apparently no one really knows why or who at Atari was driving the sort of MIDI aspect of it, but because they just did that one little thing, adding that port meant the Steinberg team took it, and then of course the C-Lab team who created Creator and Notator, which latterly became Logic. They're the other big one, obviously. But then There's discovered there's loads of really weird, esoteric, algorithmic things for the ST as well,
there's loads of it. And there's really cool synth editors as well. The Dr. T synth editors are really good, and they do like really cool like randomization stuff.
I actually once tried the one for the TG77, which I have. We're getting ahead of ourselves on FM synths, but it's like a whole era. Anyway, I bought one, so I'm waiting to get it. But I want to get one working in here and have a little setup.
You bought the ST and got it working. Yeah. I haven't turned mine on for years, but you can get little add-ons. I've got some sort of add-on that clips in the back, and then you've got thousands of megabytes of hard drive space and stuff, and you can get all the apps on and stuff. But I haven't touched it in a long time.
Sell it to me. I'll make some music with it.
Well, yeah, no, I did sort of go for a phase of just making loads and loads of synth patches with it and saving them. And on my TX81Z, I think it's just full of them, of these random FM patches that I made. But some of them are amazing. These kind of things, they're fun for a bit, and then you sort of realize, oh god, but why does it take 5 minutes to load anything? And suddenly it becomes a pain again. You think, oh yeah.
We could say the same thing about modular synths. I mean,
the
question is how much inconvenience are you willing to put up with? Where do you want your inconvenience? Part of this came from the fact that I was actually just sick of making music with Ableton Live, or not sick of it, because it's no fault of Ableton Live. It's an amazing piece of software. It's literally never been better. But it's more just I myself have developed habits that just do not seem to go away. And I'm by using, on here, I've got a whole wall of keyboards, and I'm going to put my Circlon in here, but I'm doing vids about other stuff. And using the Circlon or using an Atari are all just methods in my mind to basically not or break my old habits and just I'll make music the way I used to do it when I was 18 or 16, but I had Cubase, but whatever, Cubase on a Windows computer. But well, firstly, I want to ask you about what the synths that I see next to you, because I can definitely see you've got is that an MU MoFat? Pink thing. I could totally
I got that recently. Pink. It's pretty cool.
It's basically Proteus with sort of hip hop sounds, right?
Yeah, and funny weird filters.
What's your sort of take on it?
Oh, I think it's it's the same way that you got the Atari. I'd always I'd always read about them and was sort of fascinated, and heard that was the one to get, and it came up cheap somewhere, so I got it. Just to sort of play with. Yeah, and it is wicked.
Is it?
Yeah.
I've been looking at the Orbit. I really want an Orbit.
I think the Orbit might just be a little bit too cheese. A little bit too obvious. But I quite like that MoFat. It's good. It is good. I haven't had it long, and so I still haven't totally figured out how to use it, because it's quite weird the way the MIDI set up and stuff on it, but it is good. There's lots of good funny little sounds in it, and I can and maybe I'll just sort of sample it all and then sell it, but I don't know.
Are you gonna make a module that is a rompler?
Well, I guess the Squid can be a kind of rompler, because so no plans to make something that romplery. It was more just a fascination. On top of that is my RZ1, which the Squid has samples in.
That is, I learned the sampler that 3 Feet High and Rising was made on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, RZ1, which is not an MPC, and not an SP1200.
There's an Easter egg in that RZ1 samples bank on the Squid.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
Can you give me a clue to find it, or do I have to?
Oh no, I think if you go to the RZ1 bank, and then play the I think it's channel 8, and look at the cues on channel 8.
Okay.
As sort of references. It's references a famous RZ1 song.
Okay.
It's quite funny.
I've got it here, but it's not.
Yeah, after. I'm surprised more people haven't sort of noticed it. It's quite funny.
Where are you from? Where did you grow up?
Originally.
And how did you then become? What did you do before you were doing ALM?
Well, originally, I'm from West London, like Hounslow, and then we moved sort of more west to like Maidenhead Slough Way, and that's where I sort of spent my teenage years. And I guess, got into electronic music, I guess, and going out and enjoying myself and that sort of thing. And
when you say electronic music, what are we talking? What sort of music?
So I used to skateboard, and we had a little crew of us. And then one of my friends had like an older brother, and he lived on a farm, and we had a ramp on the farm in like a barn, which was pretty cool. And we'd stay there in a caravan so we could get up in the morning and skateboard all day. And we'd get up in the morning as his older brother, who was like about 2-3 years older, I guess, was coming home from being out and with all his mates, and they looked like they'd really been enjoying themselves. And he's like, oh, and they'd been going to like Sunrise and sort of real early sort of big like acid house raves and stuff. And then eventually we were allowed to come along as well, which was fantastic. And we kind of stopped skateboarding. Older brother was more into like Balearic stuff. It's sort of acid house, like original sort of early sort of acid house and Balearic stuff. And we would sort of like tag along, and we'd go out, sort of, there was the sort of clubs in Slough and Maidenhead and sort of Bracknell around that way. There was a club like every Sunday night we'd go to, and it was kind of like Balearic-y stuff, and we'd go and see like Weatherall and stuff. We all loved Weatherall. And I was quite young then. I was probably about sort of 17, 18. And then Weatherall suddenly started playing techno, and we'd never heard anything like it. Like it was sort of, he basically just started playing Underground Resistance and stuff. Like we'd heard heavier stuff, but then it was hardcore, and it was a lot more sort of tribal then when I was younger, and you were into Balearic stuff, or you were into hardcore stuff, or you were into, well, that was about all there was then, I guess. And then it kind of split more and more and more. And then I was, that was kind of like, oh yeah, this is it. This is what I like, And then around that same time was when intelligent techno, I guess, whatever, like stuff like, like the original artificial intelligence got released and stuff. And I really, I really got into all that kind of stuff as well. And then I went to university in Bristol, which was cool, and did a degree in physics. And, that was around the time of kind of trip hop, it's when like Portishead were massive and stuff like that. But Bristol had a good scene then as well. It wasn't just all that, it was all sorts, and I met all sorts of different sorts of people, and I kind of just enjoyed myself a bit too much at university and didn't do very well. And yeah,
that's what I did.
I passed my degree, but I got a third, which wasn't very good. And I was like the first person in my family to go to university and stuff. And like my parents had essentially paid for me to go, and I just sort of fucked it all up. And I was I'd sort of convinced myself that I'd get a 2-2, but I didn't. I got a third, and then like that whole sort of culture at university as well. If you don't get like a first or a 2-1, then you're done. That's it.
Well, that's not true.
Yeah.
In retrospect.
Oh no, I know, but at the time, you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was sort of good for me as well, because it was like a real kind of like shock. I thought, I've got to sort it out. I've got to sort of calm down a bit and sort of get my head down and try and get a job and that kind of thing. So I tried to stay in Bristol, but I just sort of ran out of money and I didn't have a job or anything. So I ended up back at my parents, back in Maidenhead. And I had like loads of interviews. It took me ages to get a job. And then eventually I got a job. Sorry, this is sort of, but I got the job because I knew how to use Cubase and I knew how to make websites. Right. And this was the sort of early sort of mid 90s, must have been about 94, 95, when not even people even knew what the internet was. And we had it at university, but it was like incredibly expensive to get it at home and stuff. And basically I knew sort of HTML and I knew how to put CGI scripts together. And I remember somebody saying to me, oh, you can get jobs making web page, and me like finding it hilarious, you know, like, and just sort of unbelievable that you could get paid doing that. But anyway, so I basically managed to get a job working for this company that made like a sales aids. They were like CD-ROMs that had like kind of very sort of basic software burned onto them. They did a lot of work for drug companies. So they'd sort of demo a new drug and they'd be kind of like basically sort of interactive. And then they would take them to a company and kind of demo them. You know, it would be like a bit more sort of interactive, whatever, you know. The software they used to alter this stuff was called Director, and it kind of worked like with a stage and stuff, you know, so it was kind of similar to how kind of Cubase worked. And also they'd kind of heard of the internet and stuff, and, you know, people had started having like websites made for them, so that kind of attracted them. So that's how I got that job. And then as soon as I got that job, I just sort of got my head down and I was just working, learning everything I could, you know, just like learn, and would work weekends and everything. And then I was there for about a year, and then I got a better job and moved to London.
Doing the same thing?
I actually went and worked for EMAP, who were a publishing company, and they like published like FHM and Mixmag, and, you know, they were massive at the time. You know, this is when like FHM was selling like 800,000 copies, and they had websites like really early on. So I got to work on the website. So it was like sort of junior tech, I guess, junior programmer or something. But my boss didn't know anything, and he was just like, do what you want, just keep the websites up. As long as the websites are up and running, you can sort of do what you want.
Box ticked. Wow.
Yeah. And that was wicked. That was like an amazing job because it was very sort of technical in that, you know, it was a very sort of techie job because it was very early on, and, you know, we had to keep these websites up. And I think at the time, FHM was the most highest trafficked website in the UK, because this is still like sort of late 90s, mid-late 90s.
Yes, really.
And nobody understood it in the company. We had like absolute crap to work with. The line we had up to the server was so slow, we couldn't get the logs down fast enough. And the advertisers wanted the logs because it was kind of like early internet advertising. And I figured out a way to get the logs down, to do some sort of, I don't know how I did it, but that put me in good kind of steed. And it was cool as well because there was a lot of, like, we got to work with like lots of journalists and stuff like that, and there was lots of interesting stuff going on. Like Charlie Brooker used to work there. I might remember this wrongly, but he used to write for one of the computer game magazines.
He did,
and and he used to do a cartoon. And on one of the issues, he did a cartoon where the Spice Girls all got like chopped up or shot or something, right? And W.H. Smith's pulled the magazine from all the stores, which was like the worst thing that can happen, you know. And I don't know if he got fired. He must have got fired or in a lot of trouble. And I remember sitting in the pub and him going to me, "Oh, my career's over. You know, I'm done. I've had it." And now, look, you know. Amazing. And also,
well, what's the amount to now?
Yeah. No, exactly. But I think,
wow,
yeah, that's crazy. There was a lot of kind of like interesting kind of people that working there at the time that have gone on to do interesting things. Like Tom used to work there, but I don't remember Tom.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was editor at Mixmag, and it must have been around the same time, but I don't remember him. And everybody hated the websites as they saw us as like a massive threat. So that was
correctly.
Kind of yeah,
absolutely right. Time to right.
Yeah, and we didn't make any money, you know. But that was good. It was good, and yeah, that's
So yeah, you're in London and you're basically you're making a website. And there's but then how you'd used Cubase? So had you started making music and collecting?
Oh yeah. I've been making music since I was about sort of 17, 18. Because I think when we started going out, some of my friends got into DJing and whatnot, you know. But I was like, oh no, I want to sort of like figure out how to make the stuff. And one of again, my friend's older brother, one of his mates had like a W30, a Roland W30, and I sort of worked all summer and got myself a W30. I think I had a 106 before that, like a Juno 106 and my Amiga.
Did you sample into it, or did you how were you?
I must have done. I honestly can't remember. I must have sampled into it, but I must have hated it because I wanted a sampler so badly, and like S950s were like unaffordable. The only option was like a W30. I remember I worked all summer, saved up, got this W30, and then my parents went absolutely mental at me. They were like, "What have you done? You spent all this money on this."
As in they didn't understand. They were just should have gotten an S900.
Oh, no. They were like, "Why have you spent all this money on this thing that just makes boom, boom, boom sound?"
Oh, dear.
Yeah, and all through university, I was sort of trying to make music, I guess, with like crappy equipment, and because you didn't know a lot how stuff was done. And
so you must have just had a vague inkling, and you knew someone who had it was like, "Oh, you need one of these. Just get it."
Yeah.
That's your answer.
Yeah. I had a friend that had one, and I think he'd had some releases as well. He'd had some stuff out on like an old hardcore label, like Production House, and he'd done it like just with a W30. Which was pretty cool. Like the W30s were cool. I think
isn't Liam Howlett? Didn't he use a W30?
Yeah, I think a lot of people used them. I think he started off on one.
So you got it, and you were disgraceful. You disgraced your family for the second time.
Oh, the W30 was before university, because I remember taking it in the car to university and thinking, "Oh, great! There's going to be loads of people. We're going to meet loads of people at university that have got music equipment as well, and are going to be be into making music." And
I was like you too. I had a load of gear in my room, and no one else used it. People would come in and go, "All right, mate, what's happening in here?"
Yeah, but I did in the end. I did meet a few people. Like there was people on the music course, and then I made a lot of friends at the art school, and they were a bit more kind of interesting and hip. But I didn't know a few people.
How did you then go from your job in the press / the web world? Where do you go from that? How can we get you to ALM?
So I worked for EMAT for a bit, and then I worked for like web startups and bits and pieces. I was enjoying working as it was like a whole, the internet was like really exciting, and it was real kind of like cutting edge, and it was really good fun, and a real challenge and stuff. So I guess in a way I'd kind of forgotten about the idea of sort of making music, that kind of thing, because it got very kind of like detached from the technology, because when I kind of like left it was the beginning of hard disk recording, and I was using Cakewalk because Cakewalk could give you 4 channels of like hard disk recording, but you'd have to record again and again and again because it would just glitch, but that was like amazing at the time. So I had various kind of like jobs working for web startups and whatnot. And then this is when it gets sort of quite weird. Well, I don't know, sort of more unusual. So I don't know if you remember, there was a Compaq. Do you remember Compaq?
The computer company.
Yeah. Do you remember the IPAQ? IPAQ. I was working near Oxford Street, and there was the big Dixons on Oxford Street. I don't remember if there used to be like a massive Dixons on Oxford Street.
Yeah.
And through some fluke, I got one of the first ones of them in the country. The reason why I wanted it is because there was a project at MIT to run Linux on them. And I was completely like fascinated by this and kind of like besotted by it. So I got this iPack, and I managed to get it to boot Linux, right? Which at the time was like, what the, it was like completely mind blowing that something like this small could run like Unix. It was completely kind of useless in terms of UI wise and whatnot. Well, in my spare time I started sort of contributing to kind of like an open source effort called handhelds.org to build kind of like a UI for like a Linux UI for these things. And then I've been doing this for like a couple of years, and I had like some UI software that was quite popular, and then one day, out of the blue, I got an email from Nokia R&D, and they said, "Oh, we'll pay you to work on it full time." And I was like, and I nearly ignored the email, right? Because I thought it was somebody like messing about. But then I had a call with him, and this was to Nokia in Finland, and I could barely sort of understand the guy because he had quite, heavy Finnish accent. And I still thought it was a bit of a wind up. But they said, "Oh, but you've got to start a company for us to do this." So I started this company, and it turned out that Nokia had a kind of R&D project to build like it was called the N990 internet tablet. It was kind of like an internal project to work on that. And it was kind of at the very sort of early stages. And I worked on that for maybe a year or two, just sort of by myself, working from home. But I couldn't tell anyone, I was under like real heavy NDA, so I couldn't really tell anyone what I was doing, which was quite crazy as well. And then I think that I had a friend who wanted to work on it as well, but Nokia were like, no, we're not doing any more. If he wants to work, you have to employ him, And they were like, we'll make sure there's enough work, don't worry about it. So I was like, all right. So then it sort of started to become a company. Then Nokia kind of announced this this project publicly, and you could buy these internet tablets. Like they never really did that well because they were a little bit too kind of, the hardware wasn't quite there yet. This kind of like the performance. As soon as it was public, they said, oh, you don't have to work exclusively for us. If you want to do work for kind of like other companies, then you can. We'd like you to, and we'll make sure there's enough work for you. Like Nokia were good and cool, at the time. Mm-hmm. Because this was in Nokia's heyday, when Nokia, everybody had Nokia phones.
Pre-iPhone.
Yeah.
Everyone had Nokias.
Over the next sort of few years, the company grew to like, I think it was about 30 employees. We were doing work for. Yeah.
Wow.
So it got, it got to like an all right size, and we were doing work for all sorts of companies, Sony Ericsson, then Samsung, Intel, LG, I think.
Never heard of any of these companies.
Other sort of smaller companies, but this was still pre-iPhone, right?
This is like major global telephony
in
the era when they were the big players.
Yeah. And everybody was kind of beginning to toy with Linux and putting it on things, putting it on TVs, sticking it in cars, that kind of thing. And we had various bits of software that were like pretty key, so that we'd written, but they were open source, and we'd contributed to all sorts of like open source projects from like, the Linux kernel, GNOME, X, all sorts of not X.org, not X, fucking Twitter. Jesus. Yeah, and I think this was in the space of about 8 years. And then we developed some software called Clutter, which ran the UI on top of at the time, they were beginning to put like graphics acceleration chips in things, but they only use them for games. But at the time, we put like all the UI on, so it was all like, like whiz bang, but nobody was really that into it. And Nokia didn't like it because it meant they'd have to, it was like an extra $1 a device or something, and it was all kind of like, I don't know, nobody really got it. And then the iPhone got announced, which is exactly what the iPhone did. Because I don't know if you remember the original iPhone, the UI was so smooth.
I do.
And then everything went ballistic for us. It was just like, like suddenly we'd be invited to Google and stuff, because this was pre-Android, and Android existed, but it was like really bad. And they saw the iPhone and they were like, oh my God, and like, I think Bosch Blaupunkt were interested because they do all the in-car stuff. And then Intel came along. I had a meeting in Portland with Intel, and it was like a 24-hour like the other thing is as well, is I used to work so hard, it was insane. Like I realized I didn't have one day off in a year, and I used to work like 16-hour days. Like my health was terrible. I was just like, it was absolutely insane. Like, so I had this meeting with Intel, and I flew to Portland and then flew back again, like via San Francisco, with like no sleep, nothing. Just like, it was like, when I think back, it was just like complete like insanity, but it was good. So anyway, I had this meeting at Intel in Portland, and then I went in there and there was all people in suits in there. And I was like, oh, hang on, what's going on here? And they were like, oh, we want to buy you. And then within 3 months, you know, the company was sold to Intel.
They're like, well, we want to give you some money. There you go, done.
Yeah, but it wasn't quite that simple. It was
take you on a big red eye
like,
to just give you an incentive to go, do you know what? I'm ready to like take it easy and do something different now. Like start your own.
Yeah, it was kind of like the start of a whole new level of stress. And I remember when they said it, and I could could see it coming. And I was used to smoke then as well. I used to be a heavy smoker. And I just said, I'm just going to go out and have a cigarette.
But you say it was stressful that they did this, as in you.
Yeah. Because you don't just sort of kind of like say, oh yeah, there you go, just sign here. You know, you spend like 3 months living in a lawyer's office where they, you know, because they have to do all the due diligence on the company, and I was under NDA. I couldn't tell anyone that was working for me that that's what was going on. You know, you always had the fear of like what everybody was going to think. You know, and we were a very kind of like close-knit company. You know, it was very friendly, and, you know, a lot of sort of camaraderie and that kind of thing, you know. So I wanted to make sure everybody was looked after as well, and everybody got a good deal out of it, you know, which they did. But yeah, so then I had to work for Intel for a couple of years, which kind of started off all right, but then it was a bit
corporate, I assume?
It was just very odd. It was just very, you know, I'd gone from a 30-person company to a 80,000, I think they were then, company. And I was sort of like reasonably high up with no experience of kind of like corporate politics and that kind of thing, you know. So it was pretty scary and weird, and trying to sort of look after everybody as best I could, but it was fine. You know, it was, I don't know, it was still, you know, like at the time that it was, the end kind of justified the mean, because before I sold the company, it was just before the financial crash, and I just I still enjoyed it, but I just couldn't, it was just that admin was sort of just it was just sort of destroying me. You know, it was like, we're just putting out fires all day long, and, you know, it was just too much. So it kind of came along at the right time. So I did these sort of 2 years, and then I left, and then I was like, shit, what do I do now? You know, because I didn't want to sort of like touch tech anymore. You know, I'd kind of like stared into the belly of the beast and thought, no way, you know.
That's big tech though, right?
Yeah.
As big as it gets.
I think, yeah. And so I didn't really know what I was going to do. I did like a woodworking course, and I stopped smoking, which was kind of like quite a big deal for me. And now I haven't smoked for like 15 years. I stopped smoking. I started eating a lot healthier. I got fit. I got like super fit. I'm not super fit anymore, but I'm a lot better than I was. But I did, you know, so I got really healthy. And then I was like, you can get, this was around the time that OP1 was originally launched, and I got that, and I was like, oh, this looks cool. And I thought, oh no, this is awful. I just didn't gel with it at all. Like, it looked really nice, but like using it, I was like, oh. So I sold that, and then I'd seen like modular synths, you know, DOTFA stuff, which I'd always sort of kind of dreamed of. So I got like a DOTFA system, like when you had to call the store up in Bristol.
EMIS.
Yeah. And then I got this sort of random DOTFA system and just started sort of fiddling around with it, and was like, oh yeah, this is great. Really got into it. And then I was like looking at the modules thinking, these aren't that difficult. And I remember I had some electronics knowledge from when I was a kid, like really young, and also like having a physics degree, you know, you have like a sort of good sort of technical kind of like grounding. And then I had my modular, I still had my 101 from like years and years ago. And I had like this weird MFB drum machine, which took like a ×12 clock or something, like a really odd clock. So I was like, right, I'm going to make my own module, you know, like with laser cut perspex panels. And I made this kind of like 101 like sequencer thing with computer keys. Right. So I made that. And then I also made this thing called, I think it was called a striking clock, right? Which was basically Pam, like the first kind of like Pam. But that was kind of like just kind of like a side project. The main thing was this kind of keyboard thing. And then I went to one of the very early Brighton modular meets. I think it was the second one, first or the second one. And I took this funny keyboard and the thing with me, and to sort of show and see what people... And Tom was there as well. This is like years and years ago, you know, like 15 years ago. Maybe not 15 years, but more than 10. Must be 13 maybe.
I'm trying to remember if I was there. I don't remember if I met you and saw it, maybe.
No, I don't think you were there. Yeah, this was before they were at the sort of university.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I showed off these things that I'd got, and nobody cared about this silly keyboard thing. Everybody was like, this clock thing. And I was like, maybe this is the way to go, because it had the little screen, it had the like HB bubble LED screen. So I was like, maybe I should sort of focus on that. So that's what I did. And also the keyboard thing was proving very difficult to kind of like manufacture as I was sort of figuring that out. And then I found somebody that would sort of make 50. I came up with a Pam name. And so that's trade secret, isn't it?
Oh my God. I thought I'd sneak up on you and you just like divulge. Because that doesn't sound like a Tamiya kit.
Well, no, because it's Pamela's workout, Vanessa's lunchbox. It's Vanessa's lunchbox.
Pamela's workout.
Yeah, something. Yeah, you know, and I thought that sounds much more exciting than a striking clock.
Yeah.
So I got them made, and then I had 50 done, and then I emailed Analog Haven, emailed Post Modular, and they both said, "Nah, we're not interested." And I was like, "Oh shit."
Classic projection story.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, this was meant to go a bit better. And I like worked it out 50. That I only needed to sell like 20. I thought, I'm sure I can sell 25 of them. You know, I'd sold like 3 to Brighton people. So I posted up on Modwiggler about it, and people went crazy for it.
Yeah.
And then Post Modular and Analog Haven said, "Oh, can we have some?" And they were gone in a week.
And then very magnanimous in your response. Yes, of course you may.
Yeah.
Not fucking told you so.
No, but I was really chuffed as well, because it was, you know,
of course.
I can remember like driving home from the factory with them like in the passenger seat and just feeling like, because, you know, I was really kind of like disillusioned with software and stuff then, and how kind of like just kind of like transient it is. You know, you put all this effort into it and then it just kind of like disappears and goes away. But having something kind of like physical that would kind of like exist forever, you know, and was kind of like more of a kind of like manifestation of your ideas. You know, it suddenly kind of exists. It was like quite a sort of incredible feeling. But then I had to make more, and I hadn't really sort of thought past that sort of 50. And I think the market was a lot smaller then as well. You know, like 50 had probably, you know, covered most people that had Eurorack then.
There were 50 of us.
Yeah. But it kind, you know, and then for the first sort of few years, kind of just bubbled away. I was doing sort of bits and pieces of like freelance and consulting, and then sort of doing the Busycircuit stuff on the side, thinking I don't want it to turn into another company, like ball of sort of stress. But it has. No, it hasn't. No,
it sounds like it's very different. But it has become. You've got like, you know, US and UK.
It's still tiny. There's like 5 of us full time, so it's still tiny. You know, and there's 4 of us here, and then there's Zoe over in Chicago. We have like a tiny Chicago office, which is kind of like a sales and marketing office. And then, so Zoe's full time. And then there's a guy, Nick, who works there a couple of days a week as well. And then, you know, various people work sort of part time, like a day, come in and help out. You know, like there's Rupert, who helps do like the mailing list and stuff like that, and more the sort of marketing stuff. And there's a sort of wayward kid from down the road, little wayward 17-year-old, who comes in and he's not really that
intern
way. He's good. He's really
good.
He's going to
be big.
Oh no, the intern's cleverer than all of us. We have an intern, and he's like the most brainiest one out of all of us. He sort of like helps, test and package and that kind of stuff. Although a lot of it, and also a lot of the work we farm out to the factory, But
did you have it like contract manufactured somewhere?
Yeah. We use a couple of different contract manufacturers, which we've worked with for a long time and have sort of good relationships with, I guess.
What is the general process of designing a module, and what is the sort of state of your industry? Like for you, I know everyone's sort of, it feels like the bubble's burst. And do you feel like the bubble has burst? And how has it been?
I don't feel like it's burst. I feel like kind of glad we started when we did and didn't sort of start now, because we're quite, established. Like it would be tough to start now because there's so many people, doing it now. It's been like a really weird ride the last sort of few years, because we had COVID and thinking we were done and we were going to shut the company down, because the factories were shutting down, to literally within the next hour deciding, no, let's just go for it, because the factories could stay open because they made some medical stuff. So we were like, well, no, let's go the total opposite. Let's absolutely go all out. We got nothing to lose, and not much else to do, which was kind of like a good decision as things got, very busy for us, at least over COVID, to then not being able to get parts. Like COVID was great for business, but then very kind of like weird environment. And then obviously it like not bad at all, not bad, at least compared to like how a lot of people had it. But then having this weird chip shortage and sort of having to redesign things and kind of figuring out suddenly like stockpiling parts like crazy and then sort of it just going, like it just really kind of like tailing off. But
are you still selling enough, or are you sort of?
Oh yeah. We're ticking over. It's not like it's. To be honest, I was talking to someone, another man, and it's just like it's kind of just leveling out. It's kind of how it would have been if COVID had never happened. It's just kind of like readjusting. And I can't complain. And it's kind of good as well in a way, because it's kind of like making us look into doing different things, and have a bit of resilience and bringing some of the sort of technologies to other things like the MFX and
the pedals.
And the pedal and the plugins and the little Motto Akemi, that kind of stuff, which have been fun to do and we're really happy with, and maybe we wouldn't have done them if it was still COVID. Well, a lot of the time during COVID, we were just kind of like figuring out how to make fucking PAMs fast enough,
I've been playing with the MFX. You kindly sent me like an MFX, the module and the pedal as well. What are the algorithms? And then this segues us into talking about your favourite output.
That's a trade secret as well.
Because I really like the Almicon. The ALM.
I wonder what that could be based on.
Well, it's very hard to extrapolate that. And is it like classic Hall, or like is it what is it, Gressinger, or who's the dude? There's the Lord of Lexicon that's like the kind of.
I've forgotten.
And
I think it's.
Have you conveniently forgotten? I can't recall. It's basically, but it just sounds really good, and I'm curious who's doing the DSP. And what have you learned of how to make good sounding reverbs, especially?
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you that you enjoy that.
I think it sounds good. Yes, it does.
So, yeah, we all wrote different engines. Different people wrote different engines. So I wrote like the original Quadra and the original Almicon, and my favourite, the plate, the little plate verb on there.
What's that called? It's got a funny name.
Oh, yeah, it's the
P8.
Why have I forgotten the name?
P8 verb or something, is it?
Yeah. Is it PL8 for plate, like mate and the mum mate?
Yeah, okay, it makes sense now. I was like, "What's a PLA?"
But that's based on like the old Schroeder reverb, and they're just based on classic albums. But then we've just tuned them.
What is the specialness of the quadriverb? You know, have you managed to divine what is it that made it? Why is it good? What's good about it?
I think they're just good because you just know them. They're just familiar.
Yes, that's true.
You know,
defo.
And also, I think it's true. I forgot who said it about how too realistic sounding reverbs almost sound unnerving. You know, and they make you feel a bit, they don't sound good because your brain's like, oh, but I'm not in a cavern or something. You know, so these kind of like, when they sound a little bit fake and a little bit messed up, they kind of sound better, I think. You know, I don't know. And also as well, I think all the kind of like loads of the reverbs nowadays are just these massive kind of like cavernous things, you know, rather than kind of like just kind of like nice basic kind of reverbs, you know, compared to these kind of like reverbs that you can just put plinky plonk in and it sounds like Brian Eno, you know, that kind of thing. And I think we deliberately didn't put them sorts of reverbs in there, though you can get them sorts of reverbs out of it.
That's exactly what I put like, size up to 94.
Yeah. I must admit, I will put the size up to, but you know what I mean. You know, it's like, to me, they're still not kind of like super cavernous, kind of like black hole. Because there's lots of stuff. There's lots of stuff out there doing that. You know.
What's your favourite outboard reverb?
I like a quadriverb, definitely. And I do like a lexicon as well. But then, you know, I really like an RMX16, you know, sort of like early kind of verbs. I don't know. Yeah, and also I don't actually like reverb. They just sort of sound, they sound more like the sort of play. I don't know. I don't like reverbs that much. I don't know. I do. I don't know. I like...
What?
Well, if I'm making music, I'll try not to use reverb. Mainly because when I try and use reverb, I just sort of, I like it. I like sort of reverb when it's kind of like messed with. Like I really like the verb because you can really kind of like, you know, if you sequence it and mess with it, you can make it sound really odd, and you can do that kind of stuff with the plate as well. Like I love the plate on drums.
What about delays then? Surely, wow. No, go on. Yeah, what's your favourite delay?
My favourite... Well, I tell you what, my favourite, like, what was my sort of favourite delay reverb combined, and probably kind of like still is, but I just haven't used it for a while, is like Ursa Major, the SST 282. Which is a combined reverb and delay. Unit,
what does it sound like for those who don't have
it sounds very much like the simulation on the MFX.
Okay. What? I mean, how is it? Is it lush? Well,
I think it's because it's
gritty, or is there what's the quality?
No, it's just weird. It's just weird because of the way it works. Is it has all these delay lines which it feeds back, but then it modulates them, so you don't. So the feedback doesn't sort of, you know, spiral into hell. And there must be some secret sauce in there as well, although I don't think so. The secret sauce is probably just from like the analog circuitry, like the MFX kind of like models it in the kind of like textbook description, and it sounds pretty close, you know. I think because it tries to kind of like do a reverb in kind of like how a reverb actually works, because that's the other thing with reverbs is they're all basically tricks, right? Because you can't, a computer isn't really powerful enough to model a real reverb, you know, like maybe they are now, you know, to kind of like simulate all these kind of air particles bouncing off the wall, you know, which are in effect like lots and lots and lots of delay lines.
Yeah. Reverb is delay.
Everything's delays. That's the first thing you learn. The interns learn. Everything's delays.
Okay.
No, but yeah, so I guess because the Ursa does it in that sort of way, whilst a lot of other things will use like diffusion filters and kind of more kind of like complex kind of like feedback networks and that kind of thing. But I guess the Ursa kind of does it in the kind of like truish ways. It just sort of, it just has a very kind of odd sort of sound to it. It's very difficult to describe, and and it will also run in a delay mode, and you can kind of change the delay time with this dial, but then you have to press a switch to enable it. You know, it doesn't sort of change immediately, so you can almost like play it, and it sounds really good on kind of drums and stuff, because you can kind of sort of jam it. You know, it'll sound real kind of like very sort of digital, then suddenly not digital kind of thing. You know, it's almost like a flanger, then not like a flanger kind of thing. I love all that stuff because it's so amazing how they made it to work and how it sounds. And, you know, it's very difficult to kind of like, you know, emulate really, really close to, you know, it probably does sound just the same, but it still doesn't have, you know, that sort of magic about it. You know, like I love looking inside and just seeing how complicated it is and thinking, how on earth did they figure all that out? You know, and how these kind of complicated algorithms were all kind of like figured out. It's great when you want to use one and then suddenly it just breaks.
Yeah, that is great, isn't it?
Really do.
What is your favourite FM synth? You've got. I've talked to you a bit about. Just to preface, why I'm kind of getting into this is because you have got quite a collection of kind of weird digital synths, and I sort of want to ask you about weird digital in general.
My favourite is probably DX72, which is behind me, which isn't that exciting.
Why the 2 and not the brown one?
I just think it sounds a lot cleaner and a lot better. You know, like the resolution of it sounds a lot.
I like the one because it's less, because it's fuzzier and crunkier and fizzy.
Yeah, but it still, the 2 still has that fizz. You know, it still doesn't sound. Okay. It still doesn't sound like, you know, it's coming out of a computer. You know, it still has that kind of like fizz like the Castle has. They're still kind of like generating that FM in a sort of like funny kind of way, but it's almost like it sounds cleaner, but it doesn't sound like a computer's generating it, I guess. I also like, you know, TX81Z, obviously. That's like
why?
Well, because I just think it's much easier to program. You've just got a couple of operators. It's 2 operators now. No, it's 4 operators, isn't it? Of course it's 4 operators.
It is 4 op, yeah.
Yeah, of course it's 4 operator.
I've got one next to me. I was trying to pull it out of the rack just to look. It's really hard to pull it out of the rack. So I've got an E4000 satellite.
It has the little thing that comes out. It has a little thing.
Yeah, it's got the little.
Yeah.
It's got the little.
Yeah, so I like that, and then DX100 is very nice as well. They're all you know, and sometimes it can just be about the presets. Like the DX100 has all the really nice presets. It's like, that's that.
Yeah.
And then I have a Synergy, which the Synergy is which I got totally obsessed with like a few years ago, and haven't sort of played with it so much, and now there's like a really good software emulation of it, which I think is called like.
Is there?
Yeah, it's wicked. It's really good.
I don't really know much about the DK Donkey Kong Synergy.
So the Donkey Kong Synergy, it came out of Bell Labs, and how Albers. This is when I'm going to really mess up names because my memory's terrible for names and stuff. So I apologize. So it was a very kind of like early project at Bell Labs to build like a digital synthesizer, and it's basically all discrete logic for the oscillator boards, but then it has like a Z80 to control the UI and stuff. So originally they developed it at Bell Labs at like this big thing, and then they made, now I'm going to forget the name, they made like a kind of like $20,000 version that like Wendy Carlos and Krautrock people had. Like, I should know all this, but it's all, you know, my brain gets full of all the stuff. Yeah, people can look it up. And then I think DK came along and said, we can commercialize this. We can make like we can make like a version we can sell. And so they made it and sold it, but I don't think they made that many of them. And they originally didn't have MIDI, and then they did a 2 which does have MIDI. But the incredible thing about it, I don't know if Yamaha kind of, so this would have been like late 70s. I think it was developed sort of late 70s, and all the kind of like there's kind of various articles on how it's implemented, you know, and it's incredibly clever how it all works, like for the time. but you basically get 16 operators, 16 oscillators, and then you're free to combine them however you want. You can have them all like multiplying each other. You can have them running in parallel. And then you can kind of define envelopes to everything, to how it's all mixed together. And then you get these cartridges which have the Wendy Carlos sounds on them. And they're just like, you're like, how was this done? You know, some of them sound so good, and they're all like pressure sensitive on the keyboard and whatnot. Unfortunately, it's pretty much impossible to program. Like, you have to use this K Pro computer to program it. And the software is like, you know, because it's so old, they had no idea how to make the software work. So it's really kind of like, you know, like all like, you know, on a sort of text terminal as well. And kind of none of it makes any sense. But you can get some software now which makes it easier to do. And it has this cartridge slot. And what I did is I made a cartridge for it that took an SD card. And then I wrote some software that would randomize patches. So I'd randomize loads of patches, load them onto the SD card, and then just go through them till I found good ones. And somebody wrote some software that converted DX7 patches to it, but they don't sound anything like DX7 patches, but they sound wicked, you know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun like that. Who's the synthesis technology dude? I think on the Synergy list, there's like a Synergy mailing list. He's on it because he's known for like tinkering about them ages ago. I think he's now developing like an FPGA clone, which will be pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, that just seems amazing. I love that idea of the like, open playground of FM. And
the other cool thing about it, the really cool thing about it, sorry, I forgot. So this is the most important thing, right? Is so when you do FM, you've got two waveforms. You need to multiply them together. Right, that's what FM is. One has to multiply the frequency of the other one, right? And you know, early on, like in the 80s, a multiplication is a very expensive operation. You know, for a CPU, you know, it takes a lot of cycles. Thus, it's slow. You know, you don't want to do that many multiplications. You know, you want to sort of add things, you know, or subtract them. You don't want to multiply, and you definitely don't want to divide, right? So the way Yamaha got around this is they use like lookup tables, like logarithmic lookup tables, like old school kind of like maths. So they can effectively add things together when they do the FMing.
Do you mean so instead of like doing the multiplication, they just go, well, this is what these two numbers usually multiply to?
Yeah, kind of like that with like logarithmic tables. Like I can't explain it in a nice way.
Well, I would need a nice way.
Yeah, because I don't entirely 100% understand. I did, but I don't entirely 100% understand how it works. But for now, we can just sort of assume that this, you know, it just uses this trick. So it basically turns multiplications into adds, and that's how it works, which is kind of like one of the other cool things about FM synthesis is the fact that they figured out how to do this, because it would have never have happened if they hadn't have figured out this trick.
The efficiency was what
made
it possible.
Yeah, exactly. And I suspect that was probably as much to do with it as discovering FM itself. Yeah. Do you know?
Well, I know about chowning, and I know about like I read or heard Dave Bristow talking about programming sounds on the wherever it was, what was it called? That keyboard that looked like a sort of literally like a harpsichord, but it was the first digital Yamaha synth. What was it called?
Like the GX1, like the big thing.
The G. Yeah, but not the GX1 as in like the organ, but like the other G.
I know what you mean.
That one, yeah, the FM one. Yeah. And he talked about the fact that it was like you had to basically take the cartridge and go and program it on something else and bring it back to the thing, plug it in, and then see if you made a good change, and then go, no, I didn't. Yeah. So back I go.
Which is kind of similar to how the programming the Synergy works.
Not real time on the machine, but like very much non-real time. And it's sort of the kind of inconvenience that just seems incomprehensible to us now.
So the downside of the way that Yamaha does it, though, is I think everything's always in phase, at least on Yamaha ones. So you get like, you know, certain chords, you get like crazy sort of like phase cancellation. You know, you'll get volume drops. where these phase relationships are fixed, so that they're cancelling each other out. But in the Synergy, which I think came out before, maybe it came out probably around the same time as the very kind of early Yamaha ones did. They do it a different way, where they use this crazy like trigonomic identity. So they turn but it only works with sine waves, but they basically turn these multiplications into adds using like some sine lookup tables, which is kind of even more bonkers. The kind of downside of the way they do it is the phases are always moving. But of course that sounds like way better. Because suddenly the sounds sound sort of slightly more organic, I think. You know, like it sounds FM-y. Yeah. But which I think is one of the kind of like sad things about Yamaha kind of patenting FM and whatnot is, you know, they just kind of like did it their way. Do you know what I mean? It was never really kind of like explored. And I think like nowadays it's probably not much fun to explore because there's a million more kind of like exciting ways, like, you know, multiplying two numbers together on a computer is like the most trivial operation it can do. Do you know what I mean? But it's kind of like it's
I want to hear like the full fat version of FM. I want to hear what it sounds like. But I suppose then
it's kind of like a very kind of like subtle difference, I guess.
How then does like phase distortion, Casio's phase distortion, and by extension your sizzly guts, how does that work?
Well, I think kind of like phase distortion synthesis, but on its own kind of sounds quite dull and quite kind of VL Tony. You know, I think the trick with the CZ stuff and what the sizzle does is like the res wave, how it does the res wave and also the noise and also the ring mod.
What does it do? I mean, you can't tell me.
Well, no, it's not a secret. It's not so much a secret. So it has like a sine wave in ROM, which is what it distorts to get the various other wave shapes, and it uses various different distortion algorithms to get to different shapes. You know, which is why it can't really do a square. The square is still a bit odd, but it does this res wave by running the sine wave, I think, at 8 times the frequency, 8 times your kind of like frequency, and then kind of enveloping it with a triangle wave running at the actual frequency. So it looks like resonance. If you kind of like, if you take the resonance out of the sizzle and look at it on a scope, you'll see it. You know, it's quite obvious what it is, but it just sounds fantastic. And I think it was kind of like that on the CZ, and also the kind of the ring mod stuff, and also the noise. The noise is quite particular, how the noise works, and kind of combining the two, and combining kind of two voices slightly offset. You know, you just get them kind of nice sounds because it works very differently. Like Yamaha FM sounds are a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
You know.
There's like
that's what we tried to do.
Brass to Casio.
Yeah. That's what we tried to do with the sizzle, was rather than just do like a phase distortion oscillator, it's like very much a CZ inspired.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know if you saw the video we did with Satoshi and Makoto in Japan, who have done, I don't know if you heard that they've done these albums. It's up on our YouTube. You should check it. And they've done these couple of like ambient-ish albums, which are all done on CZ synths, and they sound, they're wicked. They're so good. And I'm not sure how we got in touch with them, but we were like, we've got this CZ module, you know, do you want to play with it? You know, we're pretty sure they didn't know anything about modular or anything. And we were like, we're pretty sure we've nailed the CZ sound, and they couldn't believe it. They were completely blown away by it, which was good. So that was, but you should watch the video. It's on our YouTube channel. It's only like a couple of minutes long. You'd really like it. Yeah,
you've got like a real like glut of kind of interesting FM stuff. I was obviously like Akemi's Castle and Taiko, and like, but you've not you haven't reverse engineered like the YM, or have you delved into it, you know, the Yamaha, like Yamaha OPL chips that...
I delved into it like years ago when I did the original Castle, but it was fairly straightforward because it's just like pushing registers. I had like weird kind of hardware issues that weren't related to FM at all with the Castle.
You told me like, the module you're proudest of is the Castle because of the like absolute pig it was to like actually like wrangle the pig.
It was cool developing the Castle because I got the Yamaha chips, their old Sound Blaster chips basically.
So like, and for those who don't know, literally these are the chips that were like powering your session of like Day of the Tentacle.
Yeah. They were used in like Sound Blaster cards.
What is their sort of general like capability? Like how many channels
so they're roughly equivalent to like what's in a TX81Z. So they're 4 operator. They're either 8 or 16 voice, and then they've got like some 16, drum sounds.
It's a lot.
Yeah, I might be wrong on 16 because I'm just thinking how many voices the chords on the Castle go up to. You know, and it was 10 years ago I think I did the Castle. You know, so my knowledge is quite rough, and it just uses like a little app mega chip in them. I remember having the chip on the breadboard and fiddling about, like prodding the registers, trying to get sound out of it. And then I just got random noise out of it. I got it going and it sounded so good. And I was like, I still probably got the video somewhere because I had to film it, and it's just going like, and I was like, oh yeah, this is going to sound so good. So I managed to figure out how to speak to it and everything, and, you know, get it in like attach the knobs and the CV and everything, and get it like tracking volts per octave and etc.
To be clear, this is without like a service manual or like, without the pinouts being labeled.
You get like a data sheet for the chip which tells you what registers, but you've got to kind of like, it wasn't that difficult. Like, and I think there's a lot of that kind of stuff around now, but at the time there wasn't that many people, playing around with that kind of thing. It wasn't that hard. Like, I did get it working. The difficulty was it was all working and it sounded fantastic, and I was so happy with it. But the pitch wouldn't stay. It would just waver just a little bit, but enough to be noticeable. So it would go like that, and it drove me mad, and I could not figure out what the hell it was. And I think in the end it was something to do with the layout and a trace running under like a high impedance op amp pin, and it was just causing it to behave like a little capacitor kind of thing.
Weird. I've been delving into a little bit of this with my like Atari ST obsession about how people have kind of managed to sort of strap modern technology onto old technology to make it do something that it couldn't do in the past. And that's you're another example of that. Like the people have that thing on the back of your Atari ST, there's like a ASCII or whatever it is to SD, and it's an SD card reader that talks to the Atari to create hard drives. And in your case, you're literally hot rodding a Eurorack module to the faceplate so you can like play it with your Eurorack modular synthesizer, and the chip is just like madly thinks it's in a Sound Blaster card. I don't know what the chip thinks if you asked its opinion, but it's like, where am I today, Daddy? What's this?
Really exciting about Eurorack. You could do these things in hardware that were impossible to do in software. Like you could emulate it in software and stuff, but you couldn't have the real thing, and you could take this sound source and put it into like a whole new kind of world with new control and everything. Like, it's true like with the SID guts as well, and also the mum mate, all that kind of thing, where and the
fizzle guts.
Fizzle as well. Yeah, it's easy to do when you're just making like a handful of units. It's a bit tougher when you're selling a bit more, like with the sizzle, because the sizzle the sizzle emulates the sound. There's no real Casio chip in there or anything, but it does a pretty good job.
Tell me about the FZ1 filter, because that's a particularly you bring up the thing of needing the real thing. I think there is literally no better example in all of technology, or music technology, in my opinion, because the filter on the FZ1 is obviously the stuff of legend. It's like filter sounds that I know, when you hear them, like a bit like the quadraverb reverb, like you've heard an FZ1 being squonked, like the Isoprophylex Aphex, pew, 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 like those, the snare and the kick is FZ1 filter. And so, and you hot rodded, you again extracted it, and I killed my FZ1 for you. I do slightly regret killing my FZ1 because I would like an FZ1 as well. You know,
I think the problem with FZ1s is you can't replace the LCDs on them. At least you didn't used to be able to.
You can definitely get a brightener or like a light to help with the fade.
Yeah.
They do fade.
But and they become...
I bring it up particularly because the filter is so particular, and I'm not clear whether it's analog or whether it's digital. And I bring it up because no one's cloned it. No one's done like a software version of it.
I don't think anybody really knows how it does actually work. If it's, I think it's probably switched capacitor, kind of like how the Mumma S950 filter works. But there's other stuff going on in there. It's got a very kind of like odd sound to it. But I don't think Casio, like there is a data sheet on it. It doesn't really say. Somewhere. Yeah, it doesn't really say how it's working internally. Like I thought about getting one decapped, like you sending it to China and getting it decapped, and seeing if I could figure it out from that, but it never kind of happened. And also, like it sounds great to me, it sounds great to you. A lot of people really don't like the sound of it. Like
your module that I have a fizzle guts. It twinkles. It does not do it. Chirrups. It goes. Pip, 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 pip.
Yeah, when you really modulate it, which I love.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure. They all do it in kind of like different degrees. But it's weird as well because there's only 16 levels of resonance, right? 16 steps of resonance. But on the FZ1 UI, it goes from 0 to 100. But if you listen,
there's 16 steps. Yeah.
I wonder. I don't know. I never quite understood what that was, and I never tried to kind of like heavily modulate I really liked that kind of artifact there.
The twinkle, yeah. I accepted it. What's the way of putting this? With all with all of the sort of due understanding and acceptance that a weird method like this will have its own weirdness. So you don't get this to have a normal thing. You don't get this to have a precision tool for your studio that's like a surgical surgical filter do. You get it to be weird, so it's weird. You got what you wanted,
Yeah, we haven't we open sourced all the schematics. We won't make any more. But people have made them. People have been making runs of them.
I also have there's a chap on the internet who is like, he made his own version. Did you see his stickers? Did you get one of those?
Yeah. No, I've got some. And he did a really nice panel and stuff. It was really good. Yeah.
Those stickers I put it on my Hydrosynth because I believe
Casio inside.
Yeah, the MB.
There's a sticker to be kept.
87186. Yeah, I stuck it. Here's how precious it is to me. I stuck it over the ASM Hydrosynth logo on my Hydrosynth. A fantastic digital synth and I'm going to apologize if you're the people from ASM. I want you to understand that I actually think it's one of the best synthesizers ever made, but it is one of the worst logos of any. The ASM logo. It's not good.
I don't know what it looks like.
It does not look like that, my friend. I had a sort of pet idea that they should do like a whole run of other branded stickers, very much like your kind of like, different sort of looks and different vibes, and then people could just stick them over the logo of the synth and just choose the aesthetic that they gelled with the most. If you go and look at the ASM logo for the ASM Hydrosynth, it's not. I don't think you would approve of it.
One sec, let me check. Oh yeah, it's not nice, is it?
I mean,
and it's orange.
It's orange. I like orange. Love orange. And it's the rest of the synth has deliberately got quite Roland aesthetic. They've used the same sort of typeface that you get on Roland, early 80s Roland polys, of which if we talk about aesthetic eras, like there was I don't know if you agree with this, but like they...
Oh, yeah, no, totally.
The way the JX3P was like purple, the Jupiter was purple, the Junos...
They don't do it anymore.
No, they don't. They don't do that. They have like green things and... anyway.
I like what they're doing in the... I got the little Juno thing, and it sounds, it sounds amazing. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of cool that they're doing them, like that, and that they're nice and cheap and stuff, and they sound really good. And I don't know, the UIs are a bit weird though. I think they could.
Do you mean for like the panel or the actual like menu?
Well, just a menu. They're very kind of like you have to kind of spend 20 minutes with a manual before you get a sound out of it.
Yeah, it's like mid-90s Roland,
which is a bit annoying. But
it is like the MC303's interface, which was it's not the greatest, but it got a lot of people into music. So
yeah, and I guess it's not like a 303 has a nice interface or anything, Jesus. But I guess the kind of like ends justify the means, I guess.
Of your synths that you've got, which ones do you actually mess with when you're like, I'm bored? What interface are you going to be drawn to?
I like Jupiter 6. I really like the interface on that because you can load in a patch, and with all the LEDs and the buttons, you can sort of, where you are. You know what I mean? Like on a lot of them, when you load in a preset, you're like, oh, where am I? Especially if you have like the toggly switches and stuff. And it's just really nice, the layout on the JP6. It's a lot of, and the 101 as well, they're just sort of really nice and logical. And the 101 isn't kind of impossible to make it sound bad,
Correct, yes.
A 303 is like not fun to program, but in terms of like twiddling the knobs, they sound, it's like full of sweet spots. Which is like what we try and do with a lot of the modules, is just make sure they sound good, and also make sure you don't really need to read the manual to at least get like 80% of the thing,
Yeah.
Just pick it up and go. I guess with like a 303 or something like that, if you were buying that like back in the day, then because it would be literally that and two other things, you'd have the time to kind of sit down and decode it. But nowadays people have a lot more, there's a lot more choice, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I'm sat in a room with a lot of things. So, yeah, I think there's something to be said for simple things. I don't like Eurorack modules that I have to read the manual for. That's definitely true.
Yeah.
And especially when you make videos, my line of work where I like put together a little system to make a video with, there's nothing more annoying than discovering that one of the things that I put in the case is something that I'm like, oh, God, how does this work? And then it's holding me up. I just go, well, this isn't the point of modular. It's like the point was to do something with simple components.
Yeah. No, totally.
Build something complex from it. Do you like play test things, or do you actually?
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
How seriously, how do you have a process for?
Oh yeah, no, totally. We'll just keep revising it until it's, just keep iterating basically until we're happy, and hopefully have a bit of luck along the way. I'm just trying to think, but most stuff I'm pretty happy with in terms of using it. I guess the problem that happens with us is when they launch, it's fine, but then we start adding features, and then that's when it gets a bit icky. I kind of tell myself that's fine if they're like pro level features or whatever. They're going to be there. They're not kind of core things you need to do. Yeah. It's fine if you forget they're there. Although, the squid's quite bad for it, and I do get because sometimes I forget some of the key shortcuts on the squid and that sort of, but I don't know what the way around that was about. Like when we shipped it never really had any, and then it would be like, oh, what if we just added this? It'd be cool if you could just quickly mute a channel, that kind of thing. But then, it would be like double the size. So it's always a compromise and a kind of balancing act, but generally I definitely hope a lot of our modules, you could just pick up and start bashing away.
The squid's the one that I have it here. I do not know how to use half of it. And but I laughed to myself just then because I thought the alternative is that you make it into the Akai S1000 with
yeah. But 90% of what you need to do with a squid is just patch triggers into it. Load a bank, patch triggers in, and
that bit's easy. You're right.
It's easy, and it's easy to kind of change parameters, but it's more kind of like, oh, I want to solo a channel. Or I want to change what the channel input does, them kind of things. And the aim with the squid as well was like originally the squid had no screen at all. The original plan was to have no screen, but then it was like, oh no, we'll have a little screen. I didn't want it to be like, an iPad app that had like knobs on the bottom, with this kind of like massive screen. And I really wanted to get back to kind of this kind of joy of sampling. One of the things I love doing with a squid is patching something up, getting it going, and then just loading a random bank. So everything completely changes. And it's like, oh my God, this sounds amazing. I would have never have kind of got to this point just by playing around, you know, and just, it's so much fun because you can with the squid just kind of like quickly put samples together. And I guess you could do it in a DAW, but maybe, I don't know. It
has a sound as well. And it's like, I'm reminded of like the Akai S612, which is like one of those devices that I've wanted for a long time, and I think we should have a polyphonic sampler that does similar things, but we don't. Like we should have a poly sampler that's easy, that has like the interface stuff, like the sliders. They have a start and end slider. You know, you had the Harvestman thing.
There is a sample module that does it with the sliders, with the start and the end.
Is it the Ginkgo sample slicer?
Yeah, maybe. Is it that? I didn't think it was a Ginkgo. There definitely is one, and it's got the sliders. Sort of kind of came out in the last sort of year. I think it's only 12-bit, but it sounds good.
Oh. It could be the Seb Songs have got one, haven't they?
Yeah, maybe that's it. Could
be the Seb Songs. It is indeed. The Seb Song sampler has got faders for start and length.
The squid, if you like hook like an axon up to it or something, then you can kind of set it up to work like that.
Can you? What do you mean an axon? Like
well, you plug like you know we do like the CV expanders, the Axon 1 and the Axon 2, which give you like extra CV inputs for the workout, the MFX and the squid.
I'm just looking now. Oh yes, indeed, of course.
Yeah, so these plug into the back of the modules and give you extra CVs, and then the Axon 2 has the knobs on. Yeah. And the idea was that so you can sort of like, you know, you could just assign one knob to a sample start, the other to the end, and then, you know. But I think the 6112 does something when they cross over, like maybe it reverses.
It does,
which
indeed.
I don't think
you pass them, it goes in reverse.
Yeah, which I don't think the squid will do, but it will get you sort of closer.
I also think with the squid and all of its like little nooks and crannies that it has, I think it suits, you know, if you're hard up and you've bought your squid and you've not got much else, you're going to be really glad for all of those other little things.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that's who that's for. It's like for that person that's just like, I want to rinse this. I can't buy anything else.
Yeah, you can get full tracks out of it. Like there's demos on our Instagram that are just squid, you know? Like making it like a polyphonic voice, you know, with the last 3 channels, and you can do like a lot with it.
So you're basically a seasoned product designer now, you know, 10, however many years into this. I wondered,
12 years, I think now.
Sorry, 12. Don't forget those extra 2 years. Have you got any kind of, what are your takeaways? What are your sort of lessons? And, you know, if I've learned one thing making modules for 12 years, you know, what would it be?
Oh, I don't know.
That was a good answer. If you could go back to the, you know, Matthew who was departing this software realm and wanted to like this, you know, Intel powered realm and wanted to make things, you know, what would you...
Oh, no, I would. Well, you know, I think it was that need to sort of like build things more physical. And also, I guess what I'd really like about, you know, working within music is I can use the technical, and I'm sure because you're quite technical, right? And I love the fact that I can use kind of like the technical side of my brain, you know, and keep that kind of entertained. But then I can also use the creative side as well, whether that be, you know, in making terrible music or, you know, like designing panels or, you know, coming up with like the coupe stuff or whatever, you know, It's so kind of like
hats.
Creative. Yeah. And because of that, I never sort of get bored, I guess, you know, and it kind of keeps me kind of satisfied, I guess. Whilst, you know, I guess the company before was a lot more just sort of, you know, tech and working with tech sort of people, which is great. But then, you know, I do like more sort of creative people as well, you know, and that's what's, you know, I get to meet all sorts of people and stuff, you know, it's really good, you know, made like some really good friends through it, you know, really good, you know, which I guess is kind of like an unexpected bonus of it.
Do you have any plans to like stop, or do you want to just do this?
Well, I'm not getting any younger.
Wait.
No. Actually, at the moment, we're in the process of moving to a bigger space, which is kind of the big problem at the moment. Is we need more. We're kind of working in the middle of a storage room, which isn't that nice, and we're in the process of getting a nicer, bigger space, which is what we kind of like desperately need, and also kind of like taking it easy for a little bit, because we have kind of like hammered it the last couple of years. And I want to do more things like, so we did like the pop-up shop last year, which was like, amazing fun and went so well. We built like a nice space, and we had like workshops and loads of performances, and, it was like so much fun. So I'm trying to do that again this year, but somewhere else, but I'm not having that much luck. It's kind of like one step forward, two steps back, because it's kind of finding a decent space and a decent location for a decent price. And, it's somewhere where we want to be able to make a bit of noise and sort of do workshops and that kind of stuff. A few weeks ago, I went to Chicago to the office there, to visit the office there just for like a couple of days and see Zoe. And then we drove to Detroit, which was cool. We did a workshop at Underground Music Academy, which went really well, like really, really well. And I was like, oh my God, we should do more of these. It was so much fun. Like, it was meant to run 1 till 3. There were people still there at 6. And we were just jamming and having so much fun. And also, it was amazing to go to Detroit. And, it was like a real kind of like dream to go there. And it was kind of like more than delivered. And it had a real kind of like buzz about it. It really sort of like re-energized me. There's like a free techno festival called Techtroit that we went to, which was really good. And it was free, and it was like Claude Young and everyone playing. It was like, and they, we saw the jit dancing and everything. It was like incredible. We did like the Motown Museum. That was really cool. And everybody there was really sort of friendly and welcoming, and like the fact we were English and stuff, that was really good.
Yeah, of course.
Like, I'm still sort of involved with a module development, but I don't do quite as much as I used to. I guess I kind of guide them and annoy people by saying, nah, that doesn't look good. That's not going to work.
Oh, cool. Everyone loves it when someone just isn't involved.
No. Yeah. And still thinking I'm like 17 when I'm a lot older than 17, unfortunately. Yeah, so doing more, I want to sort of do more things like that. And also like we've done the software stuff and the pedal, just kind of trying to branch out and do some more things. Because we've done over 40 Eurorack modules now,
That is a lot.
Yeah.
When you say it like that. That's mad. And software, you can make a lot more money selling software than you can hardware.
Yeah, we don't seem to be.
You need to become known, and you can't make more money than your hardware when you're obscure, but once you are known and have a thing that everyone wants to buy, let me tell you that those folks who sell FabFilter plugins, they do all right.
We're just experimenting, having some fun. I don't think we're going to get to FabFilter. Is kind of like a whole different kind of like ball game to what we're doing, and it's
you're
not
a bit more like, you could be doing a sort of Valhalla DSP kind of. You could get to that. You could be that kind of boutique niche, but sort of making a beautiful sounding, simple plugin.
Yeah, but we've made a couple of the Quad Reverb and the Almacon you can get for just like $10, which is cool. And they're not quite Valhalla.
I don't think there is a really clear Quad Reverb plugin. I've seen one, I'm sure, but there's it's a bit of a underrepresented aspect of software reverbs, it seems.
Yeah.
Valhalla, for example, don't. I talked to Sean, and he's like, I'll make you a preset that like sounds like it from the other ones, which shows you how brilliantly they're designed. But yeah, like it's a little bit untapped. But as with all things in software, your issue is just being
but also the kind of market for people that want a quad reverb sounding reverb is very tiny. Do you know what I mean? Like
I do, yeah. But
that's why the Valhalla stuff does so well. It's because it's a lot more general, isn't it? And it's a lot more extensive than
it's got insane word of mouth. I'll tell you as well, Diva, the plugin Diva from Yuhi, that sells very, very well all the time, forever, and is continued to sell very well. How old is that plugin? Firstly, it actually sounds amazing even now. And then secondly, I think it's that there is a huge snowball effect. There's a flavor of the monthism. Yeah, it shows that you need marketing and, you know, when you're breaking into a new sector. I mean, there's lots of examples of that in music technology, people trying to like branch out, and it takes a long time.
Yeah, I think we're just kind of like experimenting at the moment. And also, like, I want to use the MFX plugins on my, you know what I mean? You know, I want access to them. You know, the same way that like with the Akemi, we just wanted like a fun Akemi drum, you know, that just brings the taiko into your door and multiplies it and makes it a little bit more tamed. You know, I still totally love Eurorack, and we have like a lot of Eurorack modules coming, you know, that are in sort of production and whatnot. And we're going to do like a new complete system that's coming next.
What's the future of music technology?
I don't know, probably fucking AI.
Well, then what should it be? I don't want to
AI. No. I don't know. I saw like the Logic, you know, where it splits the stems from a track. And then this, the La La stuff where you give it a voice and you make it sing as somebody else.
My God. Yeah.
Like, you know, I don't know. I haven't a clue how any of that works, you know. So I quite like being in a little niche where the future's a little bit simpler.
Well, what's the future of your niche?
Oh, I guess just more modules, more. No, and I'd like to do something a bit more sort of substantial, standalone. You know, like we've done the pedal, but I would like to do at some point some kind of standalone thing. But I honestly haven't had a really good idea. We've played with a couple of ideas, but they haven't really totally panned out. And I think it is a very kind of like saturated market. The same as like, you know, like I was saying earlier, how we're slightly more lucky with Euro in that we're like an established name, you know, compared to like a newcomer. Like that's the problem, you know, with doing something standalone, is it really needs to kind of like stand out and be special, which I think is very tough to do, you know. And the same as with software, you know, like I think if we really went for it and really did want to do something like FabFilter or Yuhi kind of level, where we were really like, right, this thing's got to sell, you know, this thing's got to make money, then we'd have to have a really, really good idea. And sometimes, you know, they just, you know, you never really know when they're going to come to you, you know. And it's also sometimes the best time for them sort of ideas to come are when you're sort of taking it a bit easier rather than going 200 miles an hour.
Forcing it. What do you think is missing from the world of desktop? You know, what would it, if you did it, where would it?
Well, I think it's sort of affordability. You know, that I think that's the thing that sort of like sucks about a lot of this stuff, is everything's so expensive. And I guess for like, you know, like middle-aged people like ourselves, it's not that big a deal. You know what I mean? But if you're like a kid, then you know, and they're the people that are going to be making kind of like interesting stuff with it and doing new interesting stuff with it. Like, and I guess that's one thing that I sort of early on with Eurorack, I was really excited about it because I thought, oh, what sort of new music is this gonna sort of generate? And it, you know, like it used to be that technology would really sort of drive music, you know, like, and maybe it still is, but just happening a lot slower. Or it's driving it in a sort of weirder way, in a weirder, more boring way, in terms of like AI and that sort of stuff, and kind of like this kind of like super kind of produced stuff, you know, where it's so well produced, you know, and every really instrument you can hear, you know.
I think, do you know what is coalescing in my mind? I'm thinking of Sophie, the artist Sophie, who did so much stuff with the Mono Machine, and I'm thinking like, you know, she was onto something of like that idea of like, you know, the flex digital voice. And I think when you were talking, I immediately am thinking of Auteca as well. And I'm thinking like absolutely flexed out FM digital voices feel like the capability is there to have really esoteric, complex, interesting, multi-timbral but maybe sort of things. And what I would say just on that front is I don't think we have a lot of brilliant UIs for achieving that sort of thing just yet outside of the software.
But normally that sort of thing doesn't matter. Normally it's just having sort of access to something and then abusing it and coming up with something new. You know, like you look at like a 303 or lots of stuff or like grime music or anything like that. It's normally working around limitations or using limitations to to their advantage.
It's hard to do.
I don't know. I guess
FM is just such a pig because it's hidden behind its little, you know, 2-line LCD. I mean, in the case of the Electron stuff, that's why it kind of got fated, I think, is because it was, for once, it actually made it a bit more practical. Yeah, but I think with
FM is just a texture. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's just a sound, and its palette is kind of limit. You know, it'll only get you so far. You know what? You know, like it's
same kinds of things. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm sort of talking more where it's kind of like music in terms of like new patterns, new sounds. I honestly thought that that's what sort of Eurorack would give. You know, it would sort of you'd get this kind of new kind of stuff, but you know. I don't know. And also, like, I remember when I was younger and wanted to get equipment and had no way of affording it, or at least now, you know, kids can pick up a free door or a pirated door and then they've got like, you know, almost endless.
They do.
And the VCV stuff's cool as well. The VCV is like a real kind of easy way. And there is so much crazy, cool free stuff. You know, the fact you can get it for free and then there's like so many like bonkers, completely bonkers VCV modules. I heard a rumor that Aphex was using VCV a lot.
I would have very little doubt.
Yeah, and using all these like bonkers modules. You know, there's so many now.
You said you've enabled your modules in VCV for me. I'm gonna log in because like that.
But ours, I guess as much for us it's so people can try them out as well cheaply. You know, and we've been sort of developing stuff in a way. So like literally, we did the VCV sizzle in an afternoon. You know, we're just developing stuff in so we can port them there easily. And I think it's so people can try them out easily without spending all that money. Although I don't really use VCV, I do think VCV is a cool thing. And it's cool for like, you know, kids to kind of like play with modular and experience it. And we when we did the workshop, we demoed it as well. And people were like, oh, wow, you know, people didn't know it even existed, you know. And people can like learn stuff, and then you know they know how to use a physical thing, you know. And some of our modules are free, but some of them are money as well. But they're not much, you know. Expensive cup of coffee, very expensive cup of coffee, I guess. Coffee's expensive though.
Coffee can be expensive. There's a Cold Drops Yard. Actually, I might add, adjacent to where you had your thing, sold the most expensive cup of coffee in the UK.
Really? What the Redemption?
So.
Yeah, but Redemption.
It was not Redemption. It was. It's the chocolatier place. There's like a chocolate shop.
We never went in there. We were just going in Redemption, which is a good coffee place because they employ like people coming out of prison and stuff.
Like Timpson's.
They were our friends in there. They were very nice. We've made friends with a lot of the people around there. They were all very friendly. But I didn't go in the chocolate place. We took over the Spirit Land and we had a night in Spirit Land, and then and we had like Russell playing and on
that
Evo.
Big Stezza on the 100 grand.
Yeah, Rock from Evo and Dungeon Acid, and we'd kind of, I don't know how we booked it, but then we went in there. And they we got, I mean, they wouldn't let anybody in. They were like, "Oh no, you've got to have booked a table. We can't let anyone in." And people were like, "What?" And there was all people in on tables. So Rock got in there and just started playing like bwang 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 sounds and drove everybody out. And then we all came in and had a great time.
That stereo in there is like mental. I was like, "Oh, do they have like multi-band limiters where?"
We were joking that they're just like hollow and there's like Sonos's inside.
Almost certainly it's £100,000 case for your just like.
It's very nice and it sounded very good. It was very kind of them to let us do it, and it sounded very good. And I think they enjoyed having us there as well, because we did kind of like work out their system in a fun way.
Yeah, exactly.
And they did panic a bit when Russell played. And
I bet they did.
And was saying, and I was saying, "Oh, don't worry, it's all an act. He knows what he's doing. He won't break anything."
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It's been years in the making.
I know, right? Waiting for the sequel.
Hope it's been worth it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Years in the making. What a story! From acid house raves to getting your head down and making something of yourself. Commiserating Charlie Brooker in a pub with Charlie Brooker saying, "I'm finished, I'll never work again," to putting your mad curiosity into putting Linux into a handheld device, and that then leading you to getting Nokia knocking on your door, and then like starting a company, and then selling your company to Intel, and then to then step back and go, "I don't like where I've ended up," and to basically start again. What a story. What would you do if you had the money to just cut loose and start again? What would I do? I mean, I honestly think I would probably be doing something quite similar to what I'm doing right now. In fact, I kind of did, in the sense that I quit my job and have like taken on YouTube as a thing. But I don't know if that's what I'll always do. I have no idea. But I respect enormously Matthew's kind of... It's interesting. It's a really good example of, following your nose, not having some sort of awesome grand plan that you were like, "I'm going to be this when I'm older," but you just have interests, right? And you indulge those interests selfishly, or, working on open source. That's something I didn't really get an answer to. But isn't it interesting that Matthew's able to worked on all these open source things, but that then led to him receiving income? I feel that there's some sort of spiritual lesson in this. I just thought, if it's open source, then you kind of forgo any income from it. But clearly there are benefits to that. It shows my understanding, I guess. But yeah, follow your nose. What on earth might that lead you to? Maybe even founding a Eurorack company if your first life doesn't go the way that you planned. So, Matthew, thank you for sharing, opening up and speaking verbosely. There is so much to unpack from that. I am also going to try Synergize. I think that is the plug-in version of the DK Synergy. I will need to... Oh, sorry, it's called Synergia. I think that's it. Synergia, if I am mistaken, please correct me. But I'll link to it below. The DK Synergy sounded fascinating. I want to try the kind of weird out of phase, non-phase aligned FM and see what am I missing. Wendy Carlos was definitely onto something, although I don't know if I have her patience. So we shall see how much I can be bothered to program. You should buy everything that ALM have ever made, of course. And also, here's a shameless plug for ALM's plugins, something very affordable. $10 is what it costs to get both the Almicon and the Quadra verb. Almicon, obviously, being a lexicon-inspired algorithm, and Quadra verb being a quadriverb-inspired algorithm. Both of those are available for a package price of $10. That is an insane price, $10 for two amazing sounding reverbs. And as I said, Matthew sent me the MFX, so I've been trying the MFX, running Atlantics through the MFX, and it sounds banging through the Almicon, especially with lots of diffuse, exactly as he said not to do. Or he prefers this sort of shorter reverb, more mature reverb sound, not the drowning things in reverb that I love. Both of those for $10. You should definitely do that. There's obviously the Moto Akemi, which is like 6 Akemi's Taikos and a sequence. So that plugin is like $40. So shameless plug. He needs to sell those plugs. Plug the plugs. Buy their VCV plugins. There's also the free ones, like the MCO. That MCO plugin is free. There's a load of like other VCV plugins that are free and some that are costed, all of which worth having a tinker with, even as just a way of like trying out their plugins. There's that MFX pedal, which is the pedal version of the MFX, which is really nice. I've been using that in my rig. Sounds awesome. Like, I really love everything they do. And of course the sizzle. I just got that. That thing sounds awesome as well. Chord mode. I love chord modes. It's that kind of rave pastiche, which Matthew is a child of. It just sounds great. So here's your spiritual excuse to spend money on ALM things if you needed it. Other brands are available, but I've loved everything of theirs that I have had. And so more power, Matthew. I'm really glad that you're still with us. I don't mean that in a sort of death sense. I just mean that I'm glad that ALM has continued to be a successful business and that you've managed to maintain it by keeping it small. Isn't it a thing? It's not the first time that we've heard people say that keeping it small and things being manageable is half of what has made Eurorack appealing, both as a thing to get into and as a thing to stay within. The community, the friends that you make through this like niche within a niche, that's what's actually keeping it alive. And as people come and as people go, the community stands. There is always a community of like-minded, interesting people who have things in common and are friends. And that's just, yeah. I was listening to the Sound on Sound podcast. They've just created a new podcast, which is like, I think it's called My Modular Life. I'm going to check that. It's called My Life in Modules. And the first episode is an interview with We Bleep alumni Scanner, the wonderful Robin of Scanner. And he mentions that whole thing. He's like, what I find so amazing about Eurorack, one of the many aspects, is that simple fact that when would you ever have emailed like Yamaha to like offer them feedback about products and expect any kind of response, you know, about what they were doing, or, you know, even like Roland or any of these big, or Korg, like any of these big manufacturers? There is no face. They have no face. And that's not true. Of course they do. There are many faces within those companies, but the simple fact remains, it's Eurorack and these smaller niches where you can hope to actually meet and influence the development and course of these companies. They're so small, they're so agile, and they're so ready to listen that you can have an effect on them if you feed back in the right way. They're around, they're at shows. You can see Matthew, you can go up to him, chat to him, and get his opinion, take on things, and ask him questions about why things are a certain way. And that might inform what you do with them. You may change you. So just as what you say may change him. It's amazing, isn't it? It's just awesome. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for being around for this time. Finding that these conversations are having an influential effect on my own life, following the conversation that I had recently with Nick Batt on the podcast, I ended up acquiring a couple of Atari STs, one of which I'm waiting to receive, the other of which I have received, and I'm in the process of getting the requisite like mouse and monitor adapter for, because I suddenly had a brainwave, which is that I could use the Atari ST to sequence a bunch of gear that I have sat around. I have so much kind of 90s crap sat in my studio that I have enough to basically recreate the same type of setup that I had when I was 16 and first started making music. And I realized that I'm being subconsciously influenced by a previous bleep. That is the one with BT, Beatty, who talked about recreating his kind of childhood music making setup in the back corner of his own studio. A thing that I just thought was absolutely wonderful. The idea that you have access to your old setup for the ability to delve into what was good about it. What was probably good about it, mainly from my perspective, was the simple fact that there wasn't much in it and it didn't have the internet. So all of the associated distractions, research sojourns into deep Google rabbit holes, as well as obviously social media and phones, were not present. And so that's something that I'm seeking to recreate in one of the corners of my studio. And yeah, long story short is that as I was mentioning briefly with Matthew, is that there are loads and loads of affordances now for making Atari STs kind of better than they were, much better, in fact. And so you can easily upgrade the RAM. There's websites where they'll sell you any form of RAM that you need to upgrade. Some you'd need to solder, and some you can just drop in, especially if you have an STE. And then there's also these amazing hard drive emulators. The one that I mentioned was actually the ACSI to STM, AXI to STM. And basically that's an amazing, also open source, I believe, thing where it's a little circuit board that pushes into the hard drive port and it uses SD cards to emulate hard drives. And you can not obviously, but I can tell you that you can emulate an almost embarrassing amount of hard drive space compared to what was possible back in 1985 or 6 when these things were first introduced. And it's been a wonderful rabbit hole of nostalgic tech. I'm not there yet and I'm still setting this up, but it's something that I want to cover more in videos and discuss, because there's actually some really genuinely groundbreaking pieces of software that are still interesting to play with on Atari ST. I'm thinking of things like M, literally spelled M, which is from a company called Intelligent Music and is like an algorithmic MIDI generator. Intelligent Music went on to become Cycling 74, which you've perhaps heard of. And then there's also Laurie Spiegel's Music Mouse. Laurie Spiegel, legendary composer, and Music Mouse, a algorithmic weird app where you draw on the screen and it creates chords and melodies. And one of the things that folks recommend is having 2 Ataris so that you can use one to run Music Mouse or M and another to receive the MIDI from it. And I'm going to have 2. So that's something that I can do. I'm also particularly interested to use Creator, which is made by a company called C-Lab. There was a version of it called Notator. Notator became Logic. So the genesis of one of the most popular music packages was on the Atari, but Creator specifically was used by pretty much most of the electronic musicians whose music first lit my fires when I first got into music. So, for example, LFO or Autechre, Future Sound of London. Oh, and the other one is Orbital, a band that is literally like the band that I got into music through. And they used Creator originally. And in fact, there's an amazing interview where they're like, oh, we're going to move to Cubase because, there's just that thing of seeing the arrangement on the screen. It's just got to be, I've got to have it. And then there is a latter interview where they kind of say, no, we like Creator. It works. Which is all to say that the methods inevitably influence the result. And I am constantly curious to try different methods, not to be those artists, because you never can be, but in that sense of kind of musical archaeology and in the sense of trying to divine what is it that they saw in that particular way of working. And is there some kind of lesson, some sort of truth, some sort of value? What is it that program offers? What was it that system afforded you that might be worth thinking about even now in 2024 when we have so many options? I think I'm answering my own question here.
I don't want options. I don't want endless options. In fact, I want to be and need to be restricted in some quite significant ways. So yeah, more to come on the Atari. If you're enjoying these bleeps, please consider sponsoring on Patreon. Patreon.com/Mylar Melodies. For the price of a coffee a month, you can help contribute to the ongoing upkeep of my time and support my family to eat, just that old classic, eat and heat the home so that I can continue to produce podcasts. And for nothing, you could share this episode, tell a friend, share on the social medias. That's completely free and is actually incredibly helpful. So thank you. Thank you to everyone who sponsors on Patreon for keeping this going. And yeah, if you can, please consider signing up. This was the 49th Why We Bleep. Dang. Hope I got something up my sleeve for the 50th. I kind of do. So we're not there yet though. So watch this space. Thank you to Matt Milligan for editing today's conversation. And we will be back soon with another bleep. As ever, thank you.